Okay, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, did we go through this whole list? Oh. So he says, now he's continuing, and this is more of a kind of a fiqh point, not really a hadith point. He's saying, فصل في أحاديث الدعية الدعية ترك العمل بها. Right? The idea that it's not been applied has been claimed. وليس كذلك. Right? وقد ادعى بعضهم ترك العمل بأحاديث أخر. So أخر or أخرى. Right? I can say both. So أخر is the plural of أخرى. Right? Um, وهو خطأ ظاهر كدعوى ابن قتيبة الإجماع على ترك العمل بأحاديث المسح على العمامة. ودعوى بعضهم الإجماع على ترك العمل بأحاديث. um, so why did I change that? Why did I change from أحاديث to أحاديثي? So here it is أحاديث. فصل في أحاديث. And then here it is بأحاديث. Why did I change that? The other one has fee before it, so there's no difference. Okay, so what's the difference is the first one is not mudaf ilayh. Right, so this is chapter concerning certain ahaditha, right? مررت بمساجد, some mosques. Okay, so مساجد أحاديث, so it's غير منصرف, it's not مضاف. Here, so I'm reading and I realize as I'm going through, oh, it's mudaf. So it says, some of them have claimed that there's consensus that you do not apply, that there was no fatwa based on the ahadith of the abrogation of Hajj to Umrah. Right? So this is mudaf. As soon as I got to here, I realized, oh, a hadith is mudaf. So I changed it from a haditha to a hadithi. So when a word is mudaf, it can no longer be غير منصرف. Right? مررت بفاطمتنا. Right? I walked past our Fatima. Tina. And so عجبت من أشد من ذلك. Right? I was surprised at something that was worse than that. من أشد غير منصرف. من أشد ذلك. I was surprised at the worst of that. من أشد ذلك. So when it becomes غير منصرف, it becomes when it becomes مضاف it becomes غير منصرف. ودعوا بعضهم الإجماع على ترك العمل بأحاديث فسخ الحج إلى عمرة. Again, I don't want to. It's the whole. You can read the footnotes here. I don't want to go. Just want to kind of read through these things quickly. ودعوى بعضهم الإجماع على ترك العمل بأحاديث إذا اختلف المتبايعان, the buyer and the seller, والسلعة قائمة. فالقول ما space قال البائع يترادان البيع. Right. Okay. قال ابن منذر: ما علمت أحدا قال بظاهره غير أحدا. آه، غير الشعبي. غير الشعبي. ما علمت أحدا قال بظاهره غير الشعبي. الشعبي من التابعين. وكحديث ابن عباس في دية. So دية is on the pattern فعة. عفوا on the pattern علة, like ثقة from وثيقة, and لثة and رثة from ورثة, and what else? And صلة from وصلة. Right? This is from we don't use the word the present tense, but ودى, right? ود. So أدى يؤدي, from ودى يودي, to give something over to somebody. So they, in certain colloquial Arabic, they'll say like di, right, dillo, or di, meaning give. So the idea of it's blood money that you give, right? So that's diya. كحديث ابن عباس في دية المكاتب, the blood money paid for a slave who's buying his freedom. قال الخطابي: لم يذهب إليه أحد سوى النخعي، وقد روي في ذلك شيء عن علي. وذكر الطحاوي الإجماع على ترك العمل بحديث إذا انتصف الشعبان فلا تصوموا حتى رمضان حتى. Right, so this hadith, majority has not acted upon it, the Shafi'is acted upon it. And he's mentioning all of these issues here. وعلى ترك عمل بحديث تحريق متاع الغال إلا المكحول. So the person who steals war booty and then so when it's found out that they're going to burn all of his property, or burn what he stole, etc. Right? So nobody acted upon that. So again, all these issues are مباحث فقهية. والطحاوي من أكثر الناس دعوى. So this is again غير منصرف. You can't say دعوا, right? أنت أكثر مني تهجدا. Right? So it should be it's تمييز, right? But it can't have a tanween because this is غير منصرف. دعوة is غير منصرف. How is it غير منصرف? Because you have your three letters دال عين واو followed by an ألف مقصورة. Right? So والطحاوي من أكثر الناس دعوى لذلك العون بأحاديث كثيرة. Right? And in reality, this is why would Imam Tahawi be like that? Because the Hanafi and Maliki way is the pure fiqh way, meaning the great fuqaha don't act upon these hadiths. Why would we act upon them? Right? Whereas the Shafi'i and Hanbali way is a fiqh way, but it's fiqh and hadith. It's a bit more. Right? But for the basis of the of the Hanafi and Maliki school is, what do the great fuqaha say? You know, you find Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, who was one of the key builders of the Hanafi school. We'll be saying this, we haven't found the students of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud do this. I.e., there are certain fuqaha who we revere and we see through that are much greater than other people, right? Imam Abu Hanifa studying with Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman as opposed to Hamad ibn Salama or Hamad ibn Zayd. So he's studying with the faqih over muhaddith, right? Because that's the source for fiqh. Right? So Imam Tahawi would be like that because that's the way the Hanafis are. وعامة هذه الأحاديث قد ذكرناها في مواضعها من هذا فيها من هذا الكتاب مع بسط الكلام عليها، فمن أراد الوقوف عليها فليتبعها من مظانها من الكتاب. Right. So as we mentioned before, it says قد عوضنا القارئ. I'm not sure why the Hamza is here. The Qari should be on top of the yeah. عما فاته من ذلك بما علقناه من تخريج الأحاديث التي ذكرها حافظ منها مع الكلام عليها صحة وسقما أو سقما وبيان موقف العلماء منها. بذلك تمت الفائدة الجلية لهذا الإحصاء العلمي الهام لهذا النوع من الأحاديث والحمد لله. Right, so he said, some of these discussions. So one of the most important books, particularly for Hanafis, on this issue is النكت الظريفة. Right, نكت الظريفة, yeah, by al-Kawthari. Right, so here's a hadith. If this is claimed by Ibn Abi Shayba, this is to be sahih, and Imam Hanifa doesn't follow it. Why? Right, it's a very good exercise. In just that process of, okay, here's a hadith, why wouldn't you act upon it? And you see things that, and key concept, many of the Salaf didn't act upon it. Not just the Salaf, many of the great fuqaha of the Salaf didn't act upon it. Okay. وعامة هذه الأحاديث قد ذكرنا. Okay. وقد ذكر للثوري ما وري عن عمر قال من لم يدرك الصلاة بجمع أي بالعرفة مع الإمام فلا حج له. فقال الثوري قد جاءت أحاديث لا يؤخذ بها. Right? And there's many places we see these things. Right? Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, if you look at the tarjuma, just note it down. The tarjuma of let me actually just share some quotes here because it's just very useful. Some of these things, it took a while for me to find these things, and there's much more in reality, but um, not acting upon a hadith. So just a key concept, not acting upon evidence is a sign of uh, extra evidence, right? So the police came in, they found a man with a gun, and they left. Why on earth would they do that? Right? That doesn't make any sense. Right? Why didn't they arrest him? Like, what it means is they know things that we don't know. There's something very interesting going on here. Obviously, it's complex, but um, just give me a second. I'm just trying to find this. If somebody looks up in if you look in the Sira Alam Nubala, just look on Shamila. Uh, there's many more quotes than this, and many of these things I've mentioned in that. If anybody's listened to it, my class on pluralism in Islam, right? There's a lot of material there that I kind of gathered. Um, um, so you can look at that as well. But here, this is Ibn Abi Layla, okay? So Ibn Abi Layla, this is this great faqih of Kufa who was kind of like it was like the Plato and Aristotle, the great debates. So there's a book, The Great Debates between Ibn Abi Layla and Imam Abu Hanifa, collected by Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. So Ibn Abi Layla, he says, لا يفقه الرجل في الحديث حتى يأخذ منه ويدع. Right? So the idea that, I just apply hadith is not true. Right? حتى, so this is in um, جامع بيان العلم وفضله لابن عبد البر. So write these books down, right? Just write it down, like even if you don't have chance to read it now and it's hard. But جامع بيان العلم وفضله by Ibn Abd al-Barr, very important book. A lot of these things. So a man is not considered a faqih until he applies certain hadiths and doesn't apply other hadiths, right? I.e., so this is again like somebody, you ask a question to AI, and it's kind of interesting, kind of not interesting, because actually its system is a little bit too simple, right? It's okay. You're saying, for example, cheap, is it better to invest in this or to invest in that? And it gives you a general idea. It's not very accurate though, right? Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. It depends what it's read, and it depends on how it's filtering it. Because it's not actually thinking, is it? It's just filtering based on a certain way, right? So having that, what's the phrase? Um, Sherlock Holmes knack for sifting out irrelevant information. Right. So Sufyan al-Thawri, he said, فقهاؤنا ابن أبي ليلى وابن شبرمة. So that so Ibn Abi Layla is like, he's big, right? So one of the tabi'in, contemporary Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay. Um, so one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa comes to Medina, Hassan al-Lu'lu'i. So this is in Tarikh Ibn Abi Khaythama. So the books of hadith are very important for understanding fiqh, because just the fact that they just um, they mention history, they mention things, right? So this is Ibn Abi Khaythama, Tarikh Ibn Abi Khaythama, and this is the tarjuma of, I believe, of Al-Hasan al-Lu'lu'i. So he says, فقلت للحسن اللؤلؤي أنت رجل لك علم. هذا عبد الرحمن بن هذا عبد الرحمن بن أبي الزناد وهو من علماء أهل المدينة فلو لقيته, why don't you go and visit him, right? He's a scholar, you're a scholar, go and see him. قال فاذهب بنا, right, let's go. فأتيا عبد الرحمن بن الزناد فقال لحسن, right, فقال لحسن ما لكم تروون, I have تروون. أشياء عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعن أصحابه ثم تأخذون بخلافها. Why do you narrate certain hadith from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and certain fatwa from the Sahaba ثم تأخذون بخلافها, then you do the opposite. فقال إنا نروي ما يؤخذ به وما لا يؤخذ به لنعرف الاختلاف. Right? We narrate hadiths that are acted upon and that are not acted upon, so that people should know the debate that's there, right? So A, we don't act upon everything, but B, we preserve knowledge. It's important. So this is Hassan al-Lu'lu'i in Tarikh ibn Abi Khaythama. So just write down Hassan al-Lu'lu'i, Tarikh ibn Khaythama, and it'll come back, inshallah. You'll see later on. This is from the Muqaddimah. This is in this is um, the introduction to Sahih Muslim. Okay, في مقدمة الصحيح عن عبد الرحمن ibn Mahdi, right? The great Abd al-Rahman ibn Mahdi, the hadith critic and the kind of early Maliki. يقول لا يكون الرجل إماما يقتدى به حتى يمسك عن بعض ما سمع. Right? So a man will not be an imam until he, and that who should be followed until he doesn't apply some of the things that he hears. So if there's no lack of discretion. Right? Okay, this is Ibn Abdul Barr in the Tamheed. Okay, so before we mentioned Jami' what's his book? جامع بيان العلم وفضله. That's a very important book. It's a small book, but this is Tamheed, his commentary on Muwatta, one of his commentaries on Muwatta. So Ibn Abdul Barr, great Andalusian Maliki محدث, he says, هذا حديث وإن كان مرسلا فهو حديث مشهور. It's weak, but it's famous. وحسبك باستعمال أهل المدينة وسائر أهل الحجاز لهذا الحديث. So he's saying it's enough that the Medinans act upon it and that the Meccans act upon it. That's enough. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that it's acted upon, right? So that's all you need. So the amal is more important than the da'af. This is Ibn Aqil, the late-ish Hanbali, in his Wadih fi Usul al-Fiqh. He says, قال مهنا, one of the students of Imam Ahmad said, سألت أحمد عن حديث معمر عن الزهري عن سالم عن ابن عمر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is found where, one second. This is, so here, write down Ibn Aqil al-Wadih fi Usul al-Fiqh. Right? We're going to see this. So قال مهنا سألت أحمد عن حديث معمر عن الزهري عن سالم عن ابن عمر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن هي فيها عيلان but it might be غيلان أسلم وعنده عشرة سكون on the sheen عنده عشر نسوة. Okay, عشر نسوة. So why is it عشر نسوة? So niswa is feminine. So the number has to be the opposite. So it has to be عشر and not عشرة. But there's no تاء مربوطة because it's always the opposite. خمس بنات. And then why is there a sukun on the sheen? Because the the haraka on the sheen is going to have a fatha if the word following it is masculine, and it's going to have a sukun if the word following it is feminine. So it's the opposite. So you say عشرة أولاد وعشر بنات. عشرة أولاد. So it's got a ta marbuta because the word after it is masculine, and has a fatha on the sheen because the word after it is masculine. But then it's ashru niswatin. Right? So this hadith, so then he says, قال ليس بصحيح. It's not sahih at all. والعمل عليه. But it's applied. كان عبد الرزاق يقول عن معمر عن الزهري مرسلا. So this hadith is weak. Here's the problem. But he says the hadith is not sahih. والعمل عليه. But it is applied. Right, so this is the key quote, right? So this is Ibn Aqil in the Wadih, Usul al-Fiqh, quoting Imam Ahmad. Okay, Al-Qarafi in Tanqih al-Fusul. So this is late-ish Maliki, one of the greatest. Every single madhab has certain gems. If you read about them, you want to follow that madhab, right? Like you want to become Hanbali. Just read Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, that's it, I'm going to be Hanbali. Read Imam Ghazali, that's it, I'm going to become Shafi'i. Read Fakhruddin al-Razi, that's it, I want to become Shafi'i. read Jassas, that's it. I want to become Tahawi, I want to become Hanafi. Like, so the Talib Ilm is like a kid in a candy shop or a toy shop. Like, it's after Eid and you have the money to buy whatever you want. Or you can not whatever you want, but you could buy this or buy this. So you're just running around like, should I buy this Lego? Should I buy this cool plastic gun? Or should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Going round and round in circles. Because so like each madhab is so amazing, has so many amazing people in it, and so many amazing insights, so many amazing ways of looking at things that it's kind of like almost confusing which one to follow, right? Well, it is confusing which to follow, right? In a good way, meaning they're also amazing, right? And so Qarafi is one of these people, right? He's just like a, subhanallah. So قال القرافي في تنقيح الفصول ومما ورد على مالك مخالفته لحديث بيع الخيار مع رواية له, right? One of the objections that have been put against Imam Malik is that he narrates that you have a right to buy and sell a bay and khiyar, which is, you have a right to cancel a contract as long as you're in the same place, even though he narrates it. وهو مهيأ متسع ومسلك غير ممتنع. It is a wide, expansive road and a way of going that is not wrong. فلا يوجد عالم إلا وقد خالف أدلة كثيرة. There's not a single scholar save that he has gone against countless proofs. ولكن بمعارض راجح عليها عند مخالفتها. Right? He says that's because of evidence that goes against him. وكذلك ترك مالك هذا الحديث لمعارض راجح. He said, why did Imam Malik not act upon this hadith? Because there was other evidence that was stronger in his opinion. وهو عمل أهل مدينة. And so this is the inveterate practice of the scholars of Medina. فليس هذا بابا اخترعه ولا بدعا ابتدعه. This is not something, a new thing, chapter of fiqh that he opened, nor is it some kind of new bid'ah. It's just everybody does that. So that was Al-Qarafi in تنقيح الفصول. إعلام الموقعين by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Quoting Imam Ahmad, he said, إذا كان عند رجل الكتب المصنفة فيها قول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم واختلاف الصحابة والتابعين فلا يجوز أن يعمل بالشيء بما شاء ويتخير حتى يسأل أهل العلم ما يؤخذ به فيكون يعمل على أمر صحيح. Right, so a man I have the books, I have all these different books that mention ahadith and all these different books that mention fatwa, sahaba, tabi'een. How does it work? Can he just act upon whatever I want? He says, no. You've got to ask the fuqaha. Of all these things, you need to ask the fuqaha what's been filtered out. فيكون يعمل على أمر صحيح. You know what you're doing, as opposed to crazy stuff. Here's a hadith. It's possible that sahih. My sheikh says it says sahih. Here's a fatwa that does exist. Khalas, I'm going to do it. Okay, so that was إعلام الموقعين by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Now we have Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. Kind of proto or semi-hadithi usul book, right? Early Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, early Shafi'i. Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. Quoting Imam al-Muzani, like the student Imam al-Shafi'i. He says, فانظروا رحمكم الله على ما في أحاديثكم التي جمعتموها. He says, look very carefully into, may Allah show you mercy, into those hadiths that you have gathered. وَاطْلُبُوا الْعِلْمَ عِنْدَ أَهْلِ الْفِقْهِ, and seek knowledge from the people of fiqh. تَكُونُوا فُقَهَاءَ inshallah, and you'll be fuqaha. Right, so you need to know, you need to have both. Right, these are just a few quotes, and there's many, many more. So just concept, every single specialist in fiqh has acted upon weak hadiths and not acted upon sahih hadiths. Right? So it is not true to say, I just follow sahih hadith. Nobody does that. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. You have, that's just a very oversimplified system, right? Okay, and he says فصل في مصادر الترمذي بأقوال العلماء. So, so here's case in point. Narrating fiqh is not the same as studying fiqh. So Tirmidhi did not study fiqh with all of these people. He is not a Maliki, a Hanbali, a Shafi'i, a this and a that, right? And in fact, so the only source for Shafi fiqh is the Shafi madhab. The only source for Hanafi fiqh is the Hanafi madhab. The only source for Maliki fiqh is the Maliki madhab. There's a big difference between a narration, right, and how the school has been passed on from school, student to student, right? And for that reason, the other madhahib, قد انقرضت, have gone away because all we have is a few words, but we don't know what they mean. So if you even if you wanted to, you couldn't follow the madhab of al-Awza'i or Sufyan al-Thawri or Ibn Uyayna or somebody like that because you don't actually know what they're saying, right? So a quote is not the same as what does it actually mean, right? Does that make sense? So this is really fundamental. And surprise, surprise, our author, despite his love of the Salaf and despite his deep knowledge of the Salaf, he tells us, follow the form of Dahib. He has a whole book on it, right? It says, فصل في مصادر الترمذي بأقوال العلماء في الفقه وعلل الحديث. قال أبو عيسى الترمذي رحمه الله: وما ذكرنا في هذا الكتاب من اختيار الفقهاء فما كان فيه من قول سفيان الثوري فأكثره ما حدثنا به محمد بن عثمان الكوفي. Right? So again, that's not how fiqh works. Right? حدثنا عبيد الله بن موسى عن سفيان الثوري. Right? So how does fiqh work? Through talaqi. What does it mean? What does it not mean? Difference of agreement on how it's to be applied, how it doesn't apply, right? So you have Imam Malik and you have the Ashab of Imam Malik, and they thrash it out for a generation or two, and that's the fiqh, as opposed to, oh, here's a quote, right? Here's a fatwa from somebody, right? ومنه ما حدثني أبو الفضل مكتوم بن العباس الترمذي حدثنا محمد بن يوسف الفريابي عن سفيان. Firyab, I think, is Central Asia, right? So Ab is water, right? I'm pretty sure it's a river. وما كان فيه من قول مالك بن أنس فأكثره ما حدثنا به إسحاق بن موسى الأنصاري حدثنا معن بن عيسى القزاز. So case, and again, case in point, معنى ابن عيسى القزاز على رأسي والعين, right? He's one of the greatest narrators of the Muwatta, right? But is he? Let's look him up right now. Right? Let's look him up in the Tabaqat of the Malikiyah, right? معنى ابن عيسى القزاز. Like, so here, as a Maliki, would you, here we go, like Aban, he looks in Maliki fiqh, do we ever see a fatwa of Ma'na ibn Isa al-Qazzaz? No. So this is somebody who spent time with Imam Malik, narrated hadith from Imam Malik, heard fatwa from Imam Malik, but he's not a faqih, right? Let's compare, right? Let's compare understanding the fiqh of Imam Malik through Ma'na ibn Isa al-Qazzaz versus studying with uh, Ibn Qasim. So Ibn Qasim spent 20 years, right, with Imam Malik. So what a difference. So that so it's so what I'm trying to say in terms of talaqqi, there's inqita', there's a gap in the chain. So that's surprise, surprise, you're going to have mistakes in Tirmidhi and other places because that's not how fiqh is narrated, right? That's not how tajweed is narrated, is it? Oh, I read it in this book. Or did you study it? Like you need to, like it's quite subtle actually, right? It's quite subtle. So Ma'na ibn Isa al-Qazzaz. Let's quickly look him up. Just pause here. Let's quickly look him up in. Okay, so let's read about him. Right, and I'm interested in his fiqh, not his hadith. Okay, so this is a so these are the of the Malikis. Okay, so Ma'na ibn Isa, dinar. So Al-Qazzaz, the silk seller. Al-Qazzaz, can he be narrates from Imam Malik, from Ibn Abi Dhib, Ibn Tahman, Muawiyah bin Salih, all these people, amazing people he narrates from. Ali al-Madini, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Allahu Akbar, right? Is a hadith scholar, no issues. قال الشيرازي, so this is وكان ربيب مالك وهو الذي قرأ عليه الموطأ للرشيد وابنيه. So he was the Rabib, the stepson of Imam Malik, وقرأ عليه الموطأ للرشيد, and so he's the one who in the Rashid, the Khalifa, when he's studying the Muwatta, he read it. وكان he was always there. وعده في وعده في فقهاء أصحابه. So right, so i.e. Shirazi, which I presume this is Abu Ishaq Shirazi in his Tabaqat al-Fuqaha. وعده ابن Habib, Ibn Habib, the early Maliki, said he was of those people who stood in his stead in fiqh. Okay, interesting. So we see this is the only interesting quote so far. He spent time with him. Right, but at least one of the early Maliki said he was of those people. Okay. Um, هو من كبار أصحاب مالك. Right. وقد ذكر أيضا كثيرا من سماعه وروايته عن مالك أبو عيسى الترمذي في تجامعه. It is always there. Right. فكل ما أدخله عن مالك فقد قال في آخر كتابه أنه كان أشد الناس ملازمة لمالك، كان يتكئ عليه أخرج عنه البخاري ومسلم. fantastic. أوثق أصحاب مالك وأثبتهم معا. أم... كثير الحديث. قال علي المديني أخرج إلينا معا 40,000 مسألة سمعها من مالك. Okay, that's fiqh then, right? Um, قال معا كان مالك لا يجيب أحدا من العراقيين حتى أكون أنا الذي أسأله عنه. Uh, so to come along and say he's worthless in fiqh is not true, right? Ibn Habib mentions him of the fuqaha of Medina. People are saying that he's this kind of like the go-between when people are asking fiqh, etc. But that's about it, right? That's about it. Let's go to like I've never seen his name in I just where does he come in fiqh? I don't know. So let's try and see. Let's look in a book in let's pause. Okay. Anyway, I'm not sure where we stopped the recording, so let's go back. So we're just mentioning um sources for fiqh. We mentioned those things in the Maliki school. Don't know when. So we basically mentioning that we looked at Ma'na ibn Isa al-Qazzaz. Um, I don't know when we restarted it. He's not a huge Maliki, right? And so that's not how fiqh is narrated, right? So what would be more useful than this would be he's, somebody studies Maliki fiqh and references these different things. But this is just narration. There's a difference between narration and talaqqi of a madhab, right? So therefore, but here I can at least cross-check this against a madhab. Here with Abdul Mubarak, I can't. So everything that's narrated from Abdul Mubarak is of this nature, mere quotes. So it's not really reliable, right? And then we mentioned case in point with Imam Shafi'i. He says most of what he narrates from Imam Shafi'i is from Za'farani. Za'farani is of the old students of Imam Shafi'i. It doesn't even necessarily represent his late opinions. So it's not reliable at all. And then he says, Abu al-Walid al-Makki, I don't know who he is. Um, and then he mentions al-Buwayti, okay, great. But there's no Imuzani, even though Imuzani is one of the key teachers of the school. So this is useful, Buwayti. And Rabi as well describe Imam Shafi, and he mentions the books. So so I'm not trying to say there's a problem with the book. What I'm trying to say is I'm going to give a fatwa from Jami' al-Tirmidhi on the Shafi school based on a quote from Tirmidhi. It's not very useful, right? And then we look here, the same thing here. It doesn't really look like Tirmidhi is narrating from the key students of Imam Ahmad. So he just mentions Ishaq ibn Mansur as the student of Imam Ahmad and Ishaq ibn Rahaway, right? So you could imagine, again, I'm not a Hanbali, you can imagine the Hanbalis, they have a bunch of, there's the key of the early Ashab. Of them is Mansur, Ishaq ibn Mansur al-Kawsaj, and he's of the many people, but he's not the most important person, or he's not, there's various different Ashab of that early period, and this is just one of them, right? And he mentions another source here, mentions exactly, happens all the time. So the problem is not comparative fiqh. The problem is the lack of talaqqi in fiqh. So you can have comparative fiqh and it's interesting and it's useful and it's not pointless, but it's just not the same, right? So then we made the comparison. We said, look how he's narrating fiqh and look how he's narrating ilal. He says, وما كان فيه من ذكر العلل في الأحاديث والرجال والتاريخ فهو ما استخرجته من كتاب التاريخ. I don't know which book, presumably of Imam Ahmad. I'm not sure what the book is. He says, وَأَكْثَرُ ذَلِكَ مَا نَاذَرْتُ بِهِ Muhammad ibn Ismail. So we mentioned this again, which is re-recording it. He says, look, these are things that I didn't narrate from Imam Bukhari. نَاذَرْتُ بِهِ, right? I sat down and discussed and this and that. What does it mean? What does it not mean? So this is a specialist from a specialist from a specialist working in a specialist capacity. Right? This is like tajweed. We went again and again and again and again and over these things within tajweed, and the differences between Imalat al-Kubra, Sughra, what's happening, what's not happening, how these things, it's subtle, right? So mere narration is not the mean. So tajweed is not, the Quran, the recital of the Quran has not reached us through narration. The recital of the Quran has reached us through talaqqi. The fiqh of the Quran and Sunnah have not reached us through narration. They reached us through talaqqi, right? As opposed to a quote of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, the quote of the Prophet ﷺ has only reached us through narration, because that is the only medium through which it can go anyway. But there's a big difference, right? So look at the difference here, right? And then he just says nobody is better than Muhammad Ismail in Ilal and Tariq, etc. But there's a big difference between talaqqi, which is munadhara, I debated, discussed, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, as opposed to somebody just doing riwayah. Right? So when it comes to ilal, there's going to be diqqah and a thaman, right? Qima, right? There's going to be diqqah and a qima when you come to Imam Tirmidhi's narrations and criticisms of hadith based on Bukhari. It's very important. As opposed to Jami' Tirmidhi as a fiqh source, it's not a fiqh source. Right? And if that's your only fiqh source, i.e., your only ability to give a fatwa from Sayyidina Ali is a narration, it's not reliable because there's no talaqqi. Right? If you want to give a fatwa of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, you have the Hanafi school. That is the closest thing you have. Otherwise, you don't have a organized, edited, debated, refined fatwa source of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Right? It doesn't exist. So fiqh only exists in the four madhahib because it is only in the four madhahib that the proper medium has been applied. Otherwise, it's just the wrong medium to begin with. Does that make sense? Let's take an analogy, okay? Aban, are you married?
No, is it?
Inshallah, you'll be married next Friday. Inshallah, ya Rab. So Aman comes and talks to me and he says, Sheikh Farid, I'm, having some marriage issues and da 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 da. Say, oh, da 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 da. And then I realize after 5-10 minutes that he doesn't live with his wife. And his wife lives on Mars. And he's talking about fiqh discussions he's having with his wife. And I said, Aban, it just doesn't work like that. You're like, yeah, but I told her this, I quoted this hadith to her, and then she's saying no, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. I don't understand. It's like, because the medium of marriage is emotional, or so how can you have a marriage when you've never seen her and she lives on another planet? Say, well, we did a contract and this and that, and all the technical things are there too, but the medium is wrong. It just doesn't work. Right? It just doesn't work. And you're like, and then surprise, surprise, ended the marriage. Okay, of course, because a marriage cannot exist like that. It can't exist that you don't even see the person ever. That doesn't make any sense. That's not the nature of it. It's not a financial contract that could potentially work from, not, but it's a deeply emotional thing. So how could you possibly like not see the person or be with the person? It doesn't make any sense. So the medium is not there, right? The medium is not there. Or somebody saying, yeah, there's a tree in on Jupiter, or I don't know, whatever it is you want to talk about. Like there's no way for this to go there because there's no medium. Right? Sound, can sound go through the galaxy? No, because there's nothing for the vibrations to go through. So therefore sound will not travel, as far as I understand, throughout space because there's no air particles to move and to bump into other air particles. So therefore it will not move. Right? Or then you say, oh, so that's just not the medium through which fiqh is narrated. And so again, all of this, beginning of Ilal Hadith by Ali al-Madini, you're going to see why are there these two systems. There's the people who do hadith and the people who do fiqh, and sometimes they're the same people, sometimes they're not the same people because it's a different thing. When you study fiqh, we're talking about ilal and systems and paradigms and exceptions. When we're doing narration, we're saying, quote, did he say this word or did he say that word? Totally different system. Totally different system. Fiqh is constructive. Hadith criticism is deconstructive. It's a different mind, totally. A different mind and a different system. Right? They're two different things. Okay, inshallah, I have to stop here. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك